Gracias. Pues muy bien, para dar inicio entonces con la conferencia inaugural, les pido por favor recibir con un fuerte aplauso a Scott Tinker, CEO de Tinker Energy Associates. Scott, the stage is all yours. Please join us. We are excited to hear from you.
Thank you. I'm not sure what she said, but I hope it was nice. It's good to be here with you today. And as soon as the folks in the front want to gather somewhere else, we'll get started. Good morning. It's nice to be here. I'm going to take you on a little personal journey before we start. Is this clicker turned on? Oh, there we go. So my brief history in Mexico. It started back 40 years ago. I did my field work for my master's degree around Monterrey. And there I am looking very handsome and very crazy. You might notice this is quite far off the ground, and that's a crazy geologist. And that's me. So I used to work for a living. It was fun. Okay. And then about 12 years went by in the industry. I didn't travel to Mexico much, but it started again back in the early 2000s. And Alfredo Guzman, who became a good friend, we did quite a bit of research with Pemex at the time. And I started speaking down here. This is a talk in 2003 on natural gas demand. Here's one in 2004, the impact of energy trends. This is over 20 years ago. And the upstream perspectives on natural gas in Mexico. And then we have new presidents coming in with Peña Nieto and new rules and opening up of Mexico. And I spoke at the Mexican Congress then. Quite a long talk on performance of the national oil companies and what they look like in a competitive environment. And gave a talk, the evolving energy mix at the Sustained Energy, and the only thing evolving it looked like was my waistline, which seemed to be getting bigger from the time that I did the field work. And then another one, we're really studying shales and producing them in North America. So you had a large talk down here on that whole shale oil and shale gas story. And then you have a new president, and things changed again. And I started speaking about sustainability to a big student group here, a summit, and here we are today. And that's just a few of the highlights. So it's been 50 trips, I think, plus or minus, for me to Mexico. So here we are. We'll do this in 3 parts. We're going to talk about the need. What's the need here? What are the opportunity? And then what are some of the options? So let's get started. I've been fortunate. I've been able to travel in that time of the Mexico visits to over 60 countries in the world. And here they are, color-coded by number of visits. Mexico is bright red because there have been a lot of visits here. And I've met people. I met these kids in Kenya who were very poor. And they were in school for the very first time in Kenya in a large slum outside of Nairobi. Met this chief when we brought solar energy to Colombia in the Arhuaco village. The first time they'd ever had electricity, just light bulbs in mud huts. Met this woman in Vietnam, and she carries her crippled son on her back every morning across that plank from their home to get him into a school. Met this man my age in Ethiopia, and he had tears in his eyes when he was telling me that his grandkids, and he had many, had come out of the bush, and they were in school for the very first time. Met Sana Kanchi in Nepal with her 5 kids that lived in a teeny little hut and cooked indoors with wood. Visited a hospital where kids and mothers were dying every week from breathing that smoke. Back to South America, in Quito, Ecuador, this little girl told me about her dreams. And that little hut was where she and her parents lived in one room with open air windows. And she had just come back from a little school. And in India, where there's a lot of people and a lot of poverty. And this is just a sampling of what's going on in the world. Gandhi reminds us that poverty is the worst form of violence. And Gandhi is right about that. So we see that energy per person consumed in the world varies a lot. The light colors don't consume much energy, and the bright reds consume a lot. It turns out the income per person varies tremendously as well, and it's similar in similar locations. So when you make a plot, a log plot of energy against income, there's a very strong trend here. The more energy you consume, the more wealth. And you can start to look at the world in three big sectors. The emerging world, 4 billion people consuming very little energy without much wealth. And then the developing world, and Mexico is in here, another 3 billion people. More energy, more wealth. And then the developed world, the rich world who won the lottery of where they were born. 1.2 billion people consuming a lot more energy and more wealth. What's the trend? How does that look over the last 25 years? Well, it's kind of messy, but again, if we separate those sectors out, you can see the emerging, the developing, and the developed. More energy and more wealth, so it looks like a good trend, and in some ways it is over the last 25 years. That's on a log scale. So are we making real progress? Let's put it on a linear scale. Watch close. Now we see a scale we can understand and read. And right here in the wealthy world, it's conveniently 50 megawatt hours per person each year and $50,000. 50-50 in the wealthy world. United States I've left on there because it's more than that. And some other countries are as well. And then there's 7 billion people pinned down here in the lower left part of this graph. Let's call this the North Star, 50-50. And yes, the rich world can continue to consume more energy and get wealthier, and probably will. But wouldn't it be interesting, wouldn't it be a good idea, if not just light bulbs and mud huts, that everybody on the planet came up to 50-50? $50,000, 50 megawatt hours for every human being on the planet today. That should be our North Star. That should be our goal. And there's nothing that prevents that. We formed an entity called Energy Core, Toby Rice and I, who runs a big natural gas company, to address just that issue. Happy to visit about that during our Q&A session. What Energy Core? How much energy would that take to get 7 billion people up to 50 and 50? A lot. Let's take a look. Well, the developed world, a little bit more energy, 1.2x. The developing, Mexico's in here, 3 times the amount of energy it consumes today. And the emerging world doesn't consume much, 10 times more energy, okay? Now look at that graph, and this is the percentage of growth in the past, pretty scattered. I just ran, this is my one scenario I ran, 2% growth, nothing crazy. 621 to 1700, these are exajoules. You can read those in TCFs of gas. About 600 TCF equivalent is what the world consumes today. We'd have to go up to almost 1800. Triple the amount of energy in the next 50 years. What would that look like? And can we do it? What would the energy mix look like? Well, I don't know, but I ran a scenario, and my slides are all color-coded. Gray is coal, green is oil, red is gas, orange is nuclear, blue is hydro, etc. Always going to be those colors so you can see where we are. The actual data for the last 60 years, coal and oil have come down 20% in the mix globally. There's the data. And everything else, natural gas and everything else, has gone up 20% in the mix. Change is slow. Transitions take time. Okay? Those are the data. Now we know we've been consuming more energy in the world because we have more people and more demand. So the percentage looks like that. These are the actual units. Coal is still increasing in the world. Yeah, it's plateaued, but last year was the highest amount of coal consumption ever. Oil is going up as well. Natural gas is going up tremendously globally. Nuclear a little bit, and everything else is growing as well. And even with the recession of 2009 and the COVID recession, yeah, dimples down globally, but right back to where we were. There's nothing structural that changed. We're consuming as much energy as we ever have in the world. We just keep adding new forms of energy. Yes, solar and wind are growing fastest of any form of energy. That's completely factual. There's the data. But it's not really factually complete. This is what people say who are teaching your children in school what the fastest form of energy growing, and yes, solar and wind, it's a rate, but let's make it more factually complete. So here we go. When we scale them, it's right here in the data, there they are. Solar and wind have grown from nothing to about 6% of primary energy in the world over 25 to 30 years. And that's a remarkable growth rate, by the way. Congratulations. But it's 6% over 30 years. It's important to remember scale. The scale of energy demand is phenomenal. Coming to the oil and gas part and the coal, a really interesting trend here. The gas to coal ratio has gone from 40% in the world to over 80%, almost 85% gas to coal. And the gas to oil ratio has gone from about 30% to over 70%. Natural gas is growing much faster than coal and oil in the world today. That's a global trend. It will probably pass coal by 2035 and oil by 2050, plus or minus. You can check me in 2050, invite me back to speak, and we'll see how I did. Okay. So here's the primary energy mix. This is what we have. What will it look like in 50 years? Again, I don't know, but I ran a scenario out that looks like this. As a percentage, coal continues to go down globally. Oil goes down as a percentage. Gas hangs in there and everything else grows. What does that mean for actual energy units? So you see coal and oil cut more than in half. Gas and nuclear triple, and everything else goes up 4 times. The left side of that doesn't look anything like the right side. The mix is completely different. But people would call this business as usual. Why? Because there's still a lot of oil and gas and coal in it. Percentage going down, but remember we're tripling the amount of energy. So you see coal plateauing around 2050. And the U.S. is now promoting coal again as of yesterday. Maybe it'll change tomorrow. Who knows? Okay. Oil is going up and plateauing. Natural gas grows tremendously. Nuclear comes and starts to grow a lot, and everything else is growing as well. That's how we get from 600 TCF equivalent to 1,700 with that mix of energy. There's a lot of oil and gas in that, isn't there? Double the amount of oil production of today almost in the world and triple the amount of gas. There's work to do. There's a lot of work to do. Are you ready, Mexico? Are you ready to contribute and play your part in this? Back in 2003, I gave this talk. I showed the import and export of gas between the U.S. and Mexico at that time in 2003. And I asked the question, well, who will export to who? In 2003, it was almost the same. Well, I think we answered that question. Let's take a look at the data. Here's Mexico's total energy consumption. The top 6 things, wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, coal, not much. Here's oil. Rose from 2003, and it's coming down, and here's your natural gas. Okay? Gas is 42% of the energy mix, and will pass oil. It continues to rise here. And those 2 alone completely dominate everything else. Why? Well, for this reason. In the United States, we see natural gas used in every sector, residential, commercial, industrial, some in transportation. But look at the electric sector in the U.S. Natural gas is just taken off. It's now the largest consuming sector for natural gas to make electricity. That's also happening in Mexico. Over half of your electricity is made by natural gas. Okay? Now, do you produce all of that gas? And is it affordable? I think Mexico's pretty smart here in terms of affordability. Let's look at 2 big states in the U.S. California, this is the electricity mix, not the total energy. Electricity mix, this is what's happened in the last 20 years in California, and we compare that to Florida, same time and the same vertical scale, same amount of consumption. But look at the difference in the choices they made. Florida, natural gas. California, a mix of other things. There's pros and cons to everything. There's trade-offs. But in the price world, Florida's cost of electricity went up a little bit, maybe 50%. California's cost of electricity went up 300%. More than twice the cost of electricity in Florida now. Right? And why is that? Why is that? But I heard solar and wind are cheaper. Didn't you? Yeah, right. Okay. What does it mean when people say solar and wind are cheaper? It means the levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE, quote, levelized. What does that mean? It means the cost of the electron where it's generated, at the plant gate, where the wind turbine is, the solar panel, the natural gas plant, the coal plant, there, that cost. And yes, solar and wind have come down and are very competitive at the plant gate. But that's not to you or me. We have to get it there. And there's costs in doing that. So when Bank of America ran the actual full system costs, look at it in Texas. And here it is in Germany. Incredible cost to making it reliable. That backup generator that has to be waiting there, or the big battery stack for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. Reliability is expensive. Mexico has a lot of natural gas in your electricity sector. That's a good thing for affordability. But are you producing your own gas? Is production keeping up? Consumption in red, production in orange for Mexico. Here's your imports. To the left of the gray area is every year, and then the right in the gray area is monthly for the year 2023. 70% of your gas is imported now in Mexico. 70%. How did that work out for Europe when they depended on Russia gas? Okay, give it some thought. And I'd like to say the U.S. and Mexico are a little more stable than Russia and Europe, but I'm not sure what's happened in the 10 minutes that I've been speaking in the United States. I have no clue. Okay. Production, the U.S. and Mexico. Here's your gas production. The U.S. produces a lot more gas than Mexico, but it was kind of stable. And then back in 2003, remember I was giving this lecture, look at the change. Mexico's gas has gone down. The United States has doubled our gas production, mostly from shale. This is a huge difference. And here's Canada, just for reference. Canada produces a lot more gas than Mexico. Should it? Does it have that much better gas resources? And oil, crude and condensate, similar story back in 2003. And here's what happened. Canada's oil has increased, Mexico has decreased. And here's the U.S. More than doubled our oil production. That's shale. Won't last forever, but that's what's happening now. A crazy difference. In fact, in the United States, the amount of oil that came from shale just less than 20 years ago was 4%. Today it's 60%. The amount of gas that comes from shale in the U.S. was 5%. Today it's over 60%. It's a shale story in the United States onshore. That brings us to the opportunity for Mexico. I gave this talk in 2015 in Mexico City, the evolving mix and its impact. It was a long talk, but these were the conclusions back then. Maximize the oil and gas opportunity. These are the recommendations. Get in front of hydraulic fracturing. This is 15 years ago. Balance the energy mix intelligently. Monetize the CO2 opportunity, EOR. Invest heavily in energy efficiency. And be cautious, thoughtful about carbon-based policies. How have you done? How's it gone here? There are no poor countries, only failed systems of resource management. What an interesting quote. These are the oil and gas wells drilled in Texas. Red gas, green oil. Let's look at 5 big regions, kind of dive into it, look at the details. Here's the panhandle of Texas. That's the number of wells drilled in the panhandle for oil and gas. Look at the Fort Worth Basin. That's where the Barnett Shale is there in red, the first big shale gas basin in the country. How about East Texas? Let's go out to the Permian Basin. A lot of the green are horizontal wells now, hydraulically fractured. And finally, the Gulf Coast. And just because you get lost in the detail, let's just zoom in. I mean, look at the well density. Okay? Laying those down on top of this map, I'm going to show you the dense maps now. We'll just kind of layer them on here one at a time. You can really start to see the detail. This took me a while to do, so I hope you appreciate it. 1 million wells in Texas. And I know those trends stop right at the border. I'm kidding. Those trends don't stop right at the border of Mexico. 1 million wells. Go back to the Cretaceous, paleogeography. Let's zoom in. They didn't know about the border in the Cretaceous. That's the depositional system there in Mexico, and it's pretty similar, okay? There are source rocks here in Mexico. They're generating hydrocarbons for your conventional reservoirs. 1 million wells here. I don't know how many you have in Texas or in Mexico. I think it's about 50,000. Correct me if I'm wrong, more or less, plus or minus, más o menos. That's 5%. In a similar area, maybe even bigger. Eduardo Meneses, many of you probably know Javier Meneses. Eduardo did a master's degree under me at UT Austin, and he looked at these shale systems 10 years ago in the yellow. They're here. The opportunities are real. And the offshore is similar. 55,000 wells offshore, a couple thousand here, 5%. Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be, okay? There's an opportunity for Mexico to expand oil and gas significantly. Significantly. So let's talk about those options. How might that be done? Well, what is an energy transition? I worry that some of our leaders, your leaders, our leaders, the world's leaders, think that an energy transition looks like this. We're going to go from today's energy to tomorrow's, like this guy. Ready? Watch close. Here he goes. He's wearing sandals. Okay. This is not a transition. This is a leap of faith. This is mucho loco. Insane. Don't do that. If you don't land, it's over. It's not an energy transition. I gave this talk to your Congress of Mexico. It was a very long talk. Some of you might have been there on the National Oil Company performance. If you were there, I'm sorry, you probably fell asleep in your tortilla soup. But I'm going to pull a little bit of it out today. Do you go it alone, or do you create partnerships? Do you bear all the risk and the cost, or do you partner? IOCs, other NOCs, technology capital, local jobs, community investments. The international oil companies have a lot of experience with a lot of things, infrastructure, maturity. They don't own the resource. They partner, knowledge and expertise, safety, health, a lot of the things, environmental management that are needed. The IOCs need a return commensurate with the risk. Can't say it any simpler than that. That might be production sharing, reserves, etc. Your objectives here in Mexico, focus on the long term. There's time. We're investing for the long term. Increase the competitiveness internally as well as externally. Maximize revenues from oil and gas. Increase or replace your reserve base. Grow production again. It's declining. There's no reason it should be. Attract foreign investment. Technology transfer. Develop infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure is needed, especially in these shale plays. Create jobs. That's a pretty nice list. What are the challenges in doing that? Well, secondary legislation. How do you design it? New laws have to reflect these things. Efficiency among government entities. Duplicated responsibilities have to be avoided. Overregulation or strong regulators. There's a big difference. The bodies with budget and autonomy. Look, these guys had good intentions. They were putting in posts to keep people from parking next to the building. They forgot where they parked. Okay. They're not getting out. They're stuck. And regulation and policy, over-regulation, does the same thing. Too much. It inhibits entrepreneurship, competitiveness in markets, and embrace competition. Market environments are critical for these things to work. There are risks in the fiscal regime. It's bad for IOCs and NOCs, poor contract terms, payments, weak agencies, things that change back and forth. Governments try to capture too much rent, take too much of the money. You got to share a little bit. The risk commensurate with the reward commensurate with the risk, okay? And finally, renationalization of oil and gas. This has happened since I gave the talk, okay? And now you have a new president. So what are the risks of reform? Regulatory frameworks don't keep up. That's a risk. The IOCs get around the rules somehow. Got to hold them to the rules. Regulatory agencies are ineffective in trying to accomplish these things. Basins aren't as prolific as maybe we thought they would be. The public doesn't see the benefit. And the public matters, particularly in Mexico. For a century, the public has had a strong thought and voice in oil and gas in Mexico. If you don't do these things, the wheels come off, all right? It gets pretty ugly. But knowing these things ahead of time, they can be prevented. So let me leave you with a couple final thoughts. The world needs oil and gas for a long time, and that's a good thing. Oil and gas has been a remarkable enabler of human prosperity. Do not be shy about that. Mexico's economy is poised to grow. You're positioned actually very well. You need more affordable and reliable oil and gas. It can't continue to decline. Great resources, luckily, with huge upside. 1 million wells, 50,000 wells, same area. Strong partnerships create that risk-return balance. Stage is set, okay? I think the stage is really set for a Mexico-U.S. partnership. We'll get through these times. But I think it's really set today for an alliance. So, seize the moment, Mexico. Go for it, all right? Gracias.
Scott, thank you very much. We will now start the Q&A session. This is your device, so you can hear the questions that are made in Spanish. Vamos a dar inicio con la sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Les pedimos, por favor, levantar la mano y nuestro personal de apoyo les acercará el micrófono. Pueden realizar las preguntas en el idioma que deseen. Ya Scott se está poniendo su aparato de traducción simultánea. Así que les pido, por favor, levantar la mano. ¿No tenemos preguntas hasta el momento? Quedó clarísimo. Scott, I think we don't have any questions. ¿Seguros?
Don't be shy.
Exactly.
I'll be upset if you don't have at least something to say,
Here,
like,
we
that's
have one.
crazy.
¿Me pueden levantar la mano, por favor? Gracias.
Well, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I have a question. You mentioned a lot about shale. What about offshore and deep water projects in the 10, 20 years to come? Do you foresee an increase of offshore and deep water projects around the world?
I'm sorry, I'm not having trouble understanding your English. I can't hear you very well.
I'm saying about offshore and deep water projects. You talk a lot about shale and unconventional. What is your view about the offshore and deep water?
So we studied the offshore basins quite a bit at the Bureau. That's what we were working on. And Macaspana, Veracruz, Salinas, other basins. And it's different tectonically. Some of the structure is different, more active tectonics than we have in the passive. I don't know what to call the Gulf anymore. Let's just call it the Gulf. In the Gulf, different, but I think there's quite a bit of upside still as you extend some of those trends down and account for the different geology. A lot of upside still. It takes a lot of exploration to do these. It's expensive. You can't stop after a few wells. In the shales, it's different. We know the resources there. It's a matter of whether you can produce enough to make a reasonable economics. Exploration, raw exploration of conventional reservoirs offshore is still risky and expensive. So it takes quite a bit of risk and investment. That's why I think the partnerships, particularly with those who have done a lot of offshore exploration in the world, would be strong. You share the risk, you share the cost, you bring in the technology and expertise. You got to share the upside. But I see strong potential for the offshore here in Mexico. Very strong, actually.
¿Alguien más tiene alguna otra pregunta? Me ayudan levantando la mano. En el fondo me ayudan entregando el micrófono. Ya tenemos 2 preguntas más. Gracias.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I had a question about your North Pole, your North Star objective, and trying to bring consumption to a standard of, I think, 50 megawatts per year per person. Shouldn't there also be some goal of actually trying to reduce the consumption per person within that target? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I understood. Should there be goals for consumption reduction, particularly in, I'm going to say in the developed world, where we consume a lot, okay, and not always efficiently? Yes, there should be. I think that 50 megawatt hours is actually an interesting North Star because as you go, that's the average of the wealthy world. Average, there obviously half of the countries are more than that. And you don't need to consume that much energy and still live a similar life. So I think 50 megawatt hours is actually a reasonable downward trend for some of the countries who consume more than that. What's the realistic upward side? Maybe it's 30 or 40 megawatt hours as things get more efficient, as we start to work toward a little bit less excess, if you will. But if you're in that 1 to 10 megawatt world, or even the 10 to 25 megawatt, and the energy comes and goes, it's not reliable to you, it's also not affordable, there's a lot of headroom. And that ends up being 6 to 7 billion people. So for me to look at those people and say, sorry, you can't consume and grow to where the developed world has, that doesn't feel right. I'm not even sure that's moral. And by the way, they're not going to do that. Everybody in the world today, even I've brought a 40-watt panel out to the Maasai country in Kenya and put it on the roof in this little metal hut where they're cooking indoors with wood, and a giraffe walked by. It wasn't a zoo, okay. And the first thing they got when they got that 40-watt panel, guess what? Cell phone. Cell phone. Everybody in the world now is connected. There's no secrets anymore about how the world lives, except in China, okay, because China closes down their media quite a bit. But even they know. So yes, definitely room for efficiency and even perhaps our approaches to consumption, but a lot of people coming up still. And so when you do that, you get to a large number in the future. It's a very good question and comment. Yes?
Scott, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I think I saw you in Turkey 12 years ago, and you were at that time a strong advocate of the shale gas development. So my question goes like this. After 12 or 13 or something years, the only country where shale really took off other than the United States is Argentina. Other countries struggled so hard, China, you name it, Europe, everything, but none of them could actually take off their shale production, I mean, to a massive scale, like you were saying, to a scale that it really makes a difference. So my point is with you, now that you were assessing Mexico's energy balance, you know that we're importing a lot of natural gas, and natural gas, of course, has improved our life, our quality, and of course, has spurred lots of economic growth. So my question goes like this. What would you think, realistically speaking, that we, Mexico, should embark in this operation of having so many, I don't know, hundreds of thousands wells drilled, and all the logistics that support shales, the water and everything, where at the same time you can only put the pipeline and just import it, the cheapest gas in the world. I mean, at the very end, my point that I want to stress is that there is really no incentive for Mexico to produce it when you are close next to the cheapest gas in the world. So what sort of advice would you give to Mexican authorities if you could in terms of these analogy? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great set of thoughts. Turkey was fun. That was an economist
That's right.
meeting, if I recall right, International Association of Energy Economists. A couple of thoughts there. The reason the U.S. leads in part is because the citizens own the resource beneath their feet. And when you get a royalty payment for the production that happens, you're motivated, pretty well motivated actually, for that operation. Because oil and gas operations are impactful. They are. They come in, there's drilling that gets done. The drilling is the impactful stage, the hydraulic fracturing. Now it leaves, and you have a gas Christmas tree sitting there, or in the shale oils, a pump jack at some point. It's always there. We have one on our little piece of land in Texas, a pump jack. Don't own the minerals. So it's impactful. Guess what, though? So are wind turbines across your landscape and solar panels that paint the landscape black. Every resource has surface infrastructure that is significant. In fact, it's greater infrastructure for low density forms of energy like hydro, geothermal, solar, wind, bio. It takes a lot more land per unit energy, watts per meter squared in those than it does for oil, gas, or uranium and thorium as they scale. So the motivation for that operation in shale in the U.S. is different. Argentina, it's not that the resource doesn't exist. Every place you find conventional oil and gas production, there's a mature source rock. And that mature source rock has the potential to be drilled. I think those who are quietly developing their shales, the Middle East and Russia, it's happening. They're just not putting it on the market yet. It's more expensive on a barrel or MCF basis, more expensive. So they're going to put their more affordable oil and gas out first from conventional reservoirs and get that arbitrage. But it'll come. A lot of unconventional reservoirs there. Your question about what would motivate Mexico when just across the border is cheap gas. I could say it in one word, Trump. Who knows what he's going to do? In Germany it was, I'm not comparing this to this, but in Germany it was Putin. Who knows what he's going to do? I think the motivator is to think long term, begin to develop those systems now, the infrastructure on the surface, the amount of sand that needs to be deployed, the amount of fluids that need to be gathered for the fracturing. It'll take 5 years or more to set up that infrastructure. And then you'll be out in front because 7 of the 10 biggest shale basins in the United States have plateaued or rolled over in their production. I gave a talk 2 years ago in Washington, D.C. called Houston, We May Have a Problem. The only ones still going up are West Texas, the Marcellus, and the Haynesville. Everything else is plateaued and rolling over. Now, they could come back because there's a lot of resource. The production isn't keeping, technology could bring that back and often does. So it's not forever from the U.S. side. And the advantage of owning your own resource and developing and producing that in the long term is significant. You have control over it. I put a bullet on there saying the public has to accept this. I think it might have been my... So what do you do? When they don't get the royalties, how do you motivate the public for that kind of operational impact? It's going to take some creative thinking, but it's very doable. So I highly recommend Mexico start. I recommended it 10 years ago. Start, get going, and take your time to do it well. The advantage of today from 10 years ago is so much has been done, all the learning is there. made the mistakes. We know how to drill those wells, the multi-stages, how long they can be, the kinds of proppant to use. You don't have to use fresh water anymore. There's just so many advantages in the understanding technologically of what you're actually fracking and what's connecting. So much has been learned. So you can gather all that information quickly. You don't have to repeat those mistakes and do it much more efficiently. What are the options? Staying dependent on the U.S., developing solar and wind, which I recommend you do, by the way, where the resource is good. Options are good. More options in energy are good. But what are the real options? There was a couple back here.
Una última pregunta. ¿Me pueden levantar la mano, por favor? I think there's no more questions. ¿Alguien más tiene una última pregunta? Aprovechen. Es el momento. Pues bueno.
There's one.
¿Me ayudan, por favor?
We have time? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for your speech. I have one question. So what you're doing with your production curves and demand curves is linear, more or less linear. But there are studies where they say that innovation comes in clusters and waves, right? And the easy question would be that what do you think about that and impacting solar and wind in the future? But maybe the harder question is, do you see any, or do you look at any clusters and waves in oil and gas production which could impact the curve going up more than what we think today?
I want to make sure I understand. The question's about technology.
Yes.
And if I think technology could increase the curve even more than we're seeing today for production?
For oil and gas.
For oil and
solar,
gas?
yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We've always underestimated technology and the impacts of it. We tend to project based on what's known today, okay? But technology never stops. The amount of technological advancements that are happening today are incredible, and a lot of them are outside of the oil and gas industry that we bring in. And we've always done that. Medical technologies, CAT scans and MRIs on the rocks, and a lot of the velocity and seismic things through the years from military, etc. AI, I haven't said it yet, but may as well, because everybody is. Understanding all that information in ways that accelerate what we're able to do and improve what we're able to do, make it more efficient. Incredible opportunities there. The big data centers that are happening and coming, our ability to combine remote sensing of various kinds, satellite-based, airborne, subsurface remote sensing, to understand these reservoirs better. The ability to put nanosensors into the earth or micro nanosensors into the earth and measure things that we never been able to measure directly before. That's happening. So technology in the oil and gas industry will continue to improve beyond what we understand today. Even the drilling technologies could get a lot more efficient and creative in that way. I just say this. The production of natural gas in the U.S. continues to increase. The number of wells drilling for gas has gone down remarkably. I think there's 60 rigs drilling for gas in the U.S. today, in the whole country. And yet we continue to increase our gas production. Some of them are 3 or 4 miles, 6 to 7 kilometers long on the lateral. I can't even run that far. It's incredible what's happening. So yes, yes, yes. If you embrace the technology, it's not cheap. You have to invest in it. We got to get our universities engaged in oil and gas again. For a while they've been told it's evil and bad. The students think that oil and gas is evil. That's been a message that's been very well promoted by a certain set of thinkers in the world. They're wrong. It has impacts, but it's actually very virtuous. Oil and gas has lifted the world out of poverty and will continue to do so. The only way to invest in environmental protection is through wealth. The economies, the energy economy environment, they're just wrong about that. but the message is very loud and the students are very worried. So we have to find courage. We in this room need to go get some courage and go talk to your schools. Go talk to your scout troops and your churches and your civic groups and your government leaders courageously and tell them about the positive impacts of this industry on the world and in this country. We have to start to speak up. Enough of the quiet, shy behaviors. It's time for everybody in this room to find courage and talk. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I still do what I do. Bring the messages from nonprofits of lifting people up out of poverty, of the positive aspects of all energy. By the way, it's not just oil and gas, all forms of energy. The technology there matters. Technology in solar and wind has improved tremendously. That's why they're getting cheaper. Technology in geothermal is really starting to take off. Nuclear, kind of been on hold for a while in the West, but China and Russia are building 70% of the world's nuclear power plants today. And there are smaller ones coming, small modular nuclear reactors and other kinds of technologies there. Neat cooling instead of light water reactors, sodium cool reactors and other kinds of things. Technology across the energy space is incredible. So yes, 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 but let's go. It's not going to happen if we just sit here and talk to ourselves. Okay. Although I love you, and I love talking to you, and I hope you invite me back someday. But let's go out there and talk to the world. Thanks for all you're doing. It's a really important mission. And the next time I come back to Mexico, I hope those curves have turned around. I hope President Claudia understands what I'm saying and is really willing to push in. She's a scientist. She gets it. Let's go help educate her and move her along, give her the courage to do this for Mexico. Thanks.
Scott, thank you very much. Please stay with us a little bit more on stage because we have a gift for you. Valentina Alvera, Vice President of Amexi, will give it to you. And please give us pose for a photo.